Hey, fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor Live on SIFTD.net. If you are watching this real time, it's because you are a very generous Patreon patron or you have generously signed up to our YouTube subscription channel. If you have done either of those or not, would you please try to remember to link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch Prime account? Amazon pays for that. You have already paid as part of Amazon Prime. It costs you absolutely nothing. And Amazon will subsidize this show. You get it real time. The instructions on how to do that are in our show description right below. If you've done none of those things, you're getting it about a week late, so it's not live. But you can follow me on Twitter. Maybe I'll leak out what I'm talking about. Today's question that we're going to start, today's topic, is the impact of the U.S. elections on the gaming industry. And, you know, I want to kind of give everybody a background on how elections generally impact any industry, any commerce. Typically, anything that makes something legal or illegal requires Congress to act. So typically, all laws originate in the House of Representatives, and then they go to the Senate for debate, and the Senate comes up with its own version. Then the two houses get together and they have something called a conference, and they settle on the law. They vote, they pass it, it goes to the president for approval. All right, so how do you get a 50% vote in both houses of Congress, that the House of Representatives and Senate? You kind of have to have them be in the same party. Now, obviously, there are things that both parties will vote on, like defense. You know, both parties want to make sure that the country, funds its military, but they don't vote the same on tax policy or on tariff policy or on any type of government regulation. They tend to differ. So, for the first time in a while, I think that Biden had it for 2 years and then lost it. Yeah, he did. And I think that Obama had it for 2 years and he also lost it. So he had it from 2008 to 10. We have very likely all three branches, all three parts of the legislative body, the president who has to sign legislation, and both houses of Congress under the same party. And it's not yet settled that the House of Representatives is coming out that way. So there's a potential that we get some laws that can impact the games industry. The president-elect, President Trump, has talked a great deal about tariffs, and I'll give you a little lecture about tariffs in a second. But he believes that tariffs are the way to prosperity, and he wants to put tariffs on all foreign goods because in his head, charging tariffs on things that are imported will give U.S. companies an incentive to make those same products here. If, let's say, and I'll give you a very clear, easy example, if Cuba is the largest sugar producer on the planet, and they are, and if Cuban sugar came into the U.S., sugar would be cheaper, and the U.S. sugarcane manufacturers or growers would make less money and they'd go out of business and we'd be dependent upon Cuba. So back in the 1950s, we put a giant import tariff on Cuban sugar and then we banned it altogether, which artificially raises the price of sugar in the US. Good for the sugar harvesters, sugarcane, not good for consumers. And what ends up happening is we replace sugar in drinks like Coca-Cola with corn syrup. You know the reason? Because we grow a lot of corn. And corn syrup is cheaper than sugar. So Trump wants to put a tariff on everything. Well, that sounds great. And, if you're buying something that is U.S. manufactured, like a car, if you want to buy a Chevy truck, that's a great deal. If you want to buy a Mercedes, not such a great deal. Or a BMW or a Porsche or a Toyota, not a great deal. So the tariffs are going to make the price of things go up. This is something I knew probably when I was in high school, but certainly when I was in college. You don't need to take an economics course to understand this. A tariff is imposed at the point of import. So the person who pays the tariff is the person who bought the product overseas and brought it into the United States. And at the port of entry, the tariff is imposed. So who owns Chinese goods that come into the US? Well, it's whoever's going to sell them in the US. That's Walmart, right? They buy Chinese furniture, import it, and when it comes on the Walmart container ship into the port of Long Beach, they pay 10% tariff or whatever Trump's going to do. I think he said 60. They pay the tariff. That means that Walmart pays it, not China. And if Walmart pays it, the only way Walmart's going to get that tariff back is to raise the price of the Chinese stuff. So the consumer ends up having to pay it. And what that does is it creates what they call a windfall for US manufacturers, because A, they just got more competitive by that 10% or 20% or 100%. And B, if in fact the US is able to make stuff just as cheaply as is made in China, then they just raise prices across the board. Bad for the consumer. So now let's talk about the games industry. The games industry creates two things: hardware and software. I mean, that's really it. Hardware is almost exclusively made outside the US. I know that there are some components that are US built, like the AMD microprocessor in a PS5 and a PS5 Pro, but most of the other stuff is not made in the US. And so when you look at the console, you know, PS5 Pro, what, $799, I believe, and Trump's been talking about 50-60% tariffs. If in fact he imposes that, a PS5 Pro is going to cost, what, $1,200 more, $1,300. So not good for consumers. On the software side, it's really hard to say that software is manufactured overseas. Yes, you may pay the salaries of people overseas who work on the games, but you're not actually importing anything. It's knowledge. So much harder to impose tariffs on the software. So odds are we will not see tariffs on games. Odds are we will see tariffs on consoles. So if you are going to buy a console in the next several years, and if Trump in fact imposes tariffs across the board, you're going to see the cost of a console go up. Now, I don't think that many people are going to be impacted by this, because PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch all are made overseas. Now, they're not all made in China. A lot of them are sourced from other places, and they're assembled in other places. And COVID, as bad as it was for our health and for our emotional well-being, caused all hardware manufacturers to rethink how they built stuff. And so Vietnam became a big manufacturing center. Japan expanded as a manufacturing center, and there is some manufacture in other Asian countries. Indonesia, Philippines have some, but Vietnam has become the big hub. And I think Vietnam has something like 100 million people. So it's, it's not a little dinky country. It's not a big country in terms of geography. It's probably a little bigger than California, but man, they have a lot of people, and highly trained, highly educated, and really good at making stuff. So the question is, when Trump says tariffs across the board everywhere, is he going to get advice from his close advisors that this is a bad idea and actually raises the cost to consumers? Now, I will say, and this is my own personal opinion, he is very likely the dumbest president we've ever had. I mean, really seriously, not a smart person. And he genuinely believes that the foreign government pays the tariff and somehow thinks they don't pass it through and the consumer doesn't see any of that. He's completely wrong. And I'm not saying this as if it's an opinion. It is fact that the tariff is paid by the person who's going to sell you the stuff here directly, Walmart, Apple, and they are not going to eat the difference. They're going to pass it through the consumer. So tariffs are inflationary. Why do we have them? I gave you the Cuban sugar example. They can be policy decisions where we want to punish a country because we don't agree with what they do. So we didn't like the Cubans and Castro and communism. We have bans and tariffs on Russian goods because we don't like what Russia's doing in Ukraine. I get tariffs on China because China has had a history of, stealing U.S. intellectual property, copying our patents and just making stuff and flooding the market. So you put tariffs on stuff like that. So they make sense in some cases. They don't make sense against Mexico because we have something that used to be called NAFTA, but it's now called the U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement that encouraged employers to hire Mexican labor along the border, and open up the border for goods so that we could have Mexicans assemble things like televisions. So for real, I think Sony manufactures US TVs in Mexico, and that was part of the deal. So I think Trump can say he wants to put a tariff there. The law says he won't. So I don't actually expect that he will do that. So I don't see him angry with Nintendo. He's not going to try to hurt Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft. I don't actually think we're going to see tariffs on those products. So bottom line is I don't expect cost of consoles to go up anywhere near what the fear factor articles are saying. I don't expect Trump to impose tariffs across the board. I think he said a lot of things during the campaign, like, I'll solve the Ukraine war in one day. Well, it's been 2, 3, hasn't been solved yet. He says a lot of stuff. I don't actually think the guy will do all the things he said. I don't think Congress will go along with it because they'll understand. And the good thing about Congress is there's a congressman for Apple's district. There's a congressman for Microsoft's district. They have power, those big companies, and they will lobby, the government to not impose tariffs on their products. So bottom line is I don't expect it to really impact gaming at all. That was a long answer. It could, and if it does, it'll drive up the cost of consoles and not much else. So long answer to not a big deal issue, but I think it's topical. So that was Pachter Factor Live. Thanks for joining us on SIFTD.net. We again thank you if you're a Patreon patron or a YouTube subscriber. And if you are one of those or not, would you please try to remember to link your Amazon Prime account and your Twitch Prime account. You have to re-up that every month or so. So if you haven't done it in a while, please check out the instructions in the show description below and get them linked. It costs nothing. You are sticking it to Amazon. They pay. You get to enjoy me a week earlier. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.